This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
We made this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Tony Black, and this is I Want to Believe Minute, where we unpick the second X-Files movie 1 minute at a time. Today, helping me to explore minute 38 as part of this block, running from approximately 37 minutes as Father Joe walks into frame, through to 37 minutes 59 seconds as Mulder and Whitney look down in horror at the ice, is once again Dr. Bethan Jones. Welcome, Bethan. We're getting towards the end of this block now, so it's a lot of fun with doing this with you.
Thanks. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. And we've still got a little bit to talk about here. So we start the minute with Father Joe walking into frame and Mulder following him as he starts to head towards where he's going to dig, really. And I suppose a lot of this minute really is about that dig, I guess, really, and about that escalation. I don't think there's a massive amount of dialogue in this minute, or maybe even the next one, really. So Mulder he's following Joe through, and obviously, again, it's just an indication that he's following Joe. You know that he's called the FBI back. He's shook off Scully's warnings, and he's fully in with what Joe's doing, I think. He
is, and I think you see that because he joins in when Father Joe sort of drops to his knees and starts to dig. Like, Mulder immediately joins in as well. So, crime scene protocol has completely gone out the window at this point. Like, he's just diving in, which, again, isn't, untypical for Mulder. But there's that sense of desperation there as well. I think he's joining in, I think, partly because he does believe Father Joe that there's something there, but I think more importantly that he wants to believe.
Hey, nicely done.
So there's that sense of desperation that he wants this man to be right.
Yes.
Which I think comes through, but there's still that hangover of Samantha as a reason for Mulder's involvement, which we discussed in the last minute, that just still feels really off. It kind of hangs over this minute, for me at least.
I just feel like there could have been a different approach to that. I don't think you needed. I think it could have simply been that he wanted to discover something that was genuinely psychic or genuinely otherworldly. As opposed to it, once again, them trying to make out that he's trying to find his sister. There were so many other things that he was interested in, even if in this case it's not aliens. He was always interested in proving. I mean, look at something like The End, where he wants to find the key to all of the X-Files, He was always interested in that, wasn't he? In proving something. That could have been enough, I think.
Yeah, and I think we see it because, when we see Mulder at the start of the film, he's cutting clippings out of newspapers about just the paranormal. So it's not just, like you said, about alien abductions. There's the whole gamut of the supernatural, and Father Joe is potentially a really good example of that. So that could easily have been the reason. And I think it would have made far more sense than it being Samantha.
Yeah, I agree. I think so, really. So, yeah. It's a bit of a narrative cheat. Let's put it that way. I think they're trying to do. But anyway, they start digging, and You know, Joey's convinced there's something in the ice, etc., etc. You get quite a few cuts away, don't you, to Scully, and still looking uncertain and concerned. Even a couple of cuts to Whitney, who is around at this point as his drummy in the background, looking a bit uncertain as well. They both do, don't they?
They do, and it's Whitney walks past Scully and she gives her a look as she's walking past, and I found that really interesting, and I wasn't sure, like, is she agreeing with Scully's uncertainty while Father Joe and Mulder are digging, or is she judging Scully for it? Because, you know, Whitney's the one who's brought Mulder in because she knows of his past experience with psychic phenomenon. We get the sense, I think, that she does believe him, and, you know, we talked about that sort of her nearly touching Mulder's face when he cuts himself shaving, that there's this weird sort of, like, intimate connection that's trying to be built up between the two of them. So yeah, it was sort of, I couldn't work out whether she was agreeing with Scully in that this digging is a bad idea, or whether she was judging Scully for not believing Mulder.
In a way, I kind of want it to be the second one, actually, because I think that makes her more interesting, really. While we're on this subject, what do you think about Whitney and actually Drummy? What do you think about those guys as FBI characters in this? Because I said in previous minutes, they feel like, in some ways, it would have had to have been written differently, but in some ways it feels like this should have been Doggett and Reyes. But I don't know whether you agree with that, and what do you think about them generally as characters?
I know what you mean. I think if it had been Doggett and Reyes, I think it would have been a very different film. And I think in that sense, Drummy and Whitney work because they've got no previous connection with Mulder and Scully. Like, they only know of them through the records that are held at the FBI. And rewatching it again, I actually really like Drummy as an FBI agent. Yeah. I like his skepticism. I like the fact that he doesn't believe Mulder, and he's sort of really just sort of solid and bullheaded and is sick to death of this psychic shit. And that's like the impression that I get.
In a different way to say Doggett would have been, you know, because even if Doggett had been like had none of the history with them, you know, he would have approached it differently as well. I think to Drummy, I think that there is a scene, and I think it comes out of Exhibit's performance as well, I suppose, doesn't it? Really, but yeah, no, I get that he's quite good, isn't he? Really. What about Whitney though? I mean, do you think that there was scope for more for that character as well, potentially?
I think there was, and I think she was underused, and her, I mean, I'm going to say spoiler, I imagine people that are listening to this will have seen the film multiple times, but her death and the way she was killed off kind of did nothing. There seemed to be absolutely no point to it.
Yeah, it's really odd.
Yeah, it was sort of just bizarre, and then, if I remember correctly, she's not really mentioned for the remainder of the film. She just kind of, falls down an elevator shaft, and that's it. It was a strange one. I liked her as a character, but I think she does sort of suffer a bit from Chris's tendency to position any woman who is even just vaguely interested in Mulder in even a professional sense, as this sort of counterpoint to Scully, and there's that whole jealousy angle coming in. That does annoy me, and I think she does suffer from that a bit.
It's funny, when we did last year, when we did the commentary track for Detour with Frank Spotnitz, we were talking about how the character of Michelle in that episode, the woman that they go in the Everglades with, she's one of those rare characters who is a strong, professional, attractive woman, who in theory could have been, placed in that position, who isn't. She gets on really well with Scully in that episode. She's focused on the job. She's really well written and performed. And I just think it's just a shame that more weren't written like that, because someone like Whitney would have worked really well in that. Because Amanda Peet's a good actor, she's one of those people that even before she made this film, she was well known, recognisable. been making films for years. I believe she's a really good friend of Duchovny's as well. And they've got a long-standing friendship.
Yeah, I think, was she in Break of Noon with him, the stage play that he did? I feel like, because I went to America to watch it, and I feel like she...
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow!
It was, yeah, I went over with a group of fellow X-Files fans, some of whom I met for the first time when I went over there.
Amazing.
And explaining to, the TSA agent at Border Control, yeah, I'm staying with X-Files fans who I've never met before because I'm seeing David Duchovny was an experience. And
they really grill you, don't they, getting into America?
They do, yeah. And it's...
Scary.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like it's either they really, really grill you, or they're like, okay, you're a geek, you're safe, you can just go through, I don't want to, an hour's diatribe on the X-Files.
Well, when I went on getting on 15 years ago now, I went on a bit of a road trip over there. And when I flew into Texas, and when I got into Texas at the Border Control, he did this very, what is the purpose of your visit to the United States? It's very, I'd just been in Amsterdam where they basically just go, go through, mate, it's fine, right? That's a connecting flight. But here, and I was like, I'm just on holiday, vacation, like this. And he was like, where are you going? And I said, I don't know. Like, we're going to end up in LA. That's really vague because I didn't know for sure where we were going to be stopping. And he just looked at me, and it felt like about 5 hours he was doing the looking at the passport, looking at me, looking at the passport, and I thought, I'm going to end up in a jail. I'm going to end up in Guantanamo.
Yeah.
No, it was fine, but it's terrifying. Whereas on the way out, they practically give you a sandwich and go on your way.
No, well, I've just done a quick Google, and yeah, Amanda Peet was in Break of Noon, so she does theatre as well as film. She's clearly an accomplished actor.
Absolutely. So you could have given Whitney more meat to chew on, I think, in that way. To be fair. But yeah, interesting looks definitely between them. And then we get to the ice, obviously, and we do get the payoff here where Mulder says it's dirty glass. And I think that was all very well constructed, actually. I do like that little payoff.
Yeah, definitely. And it is, I think, like you said in one of the last minutes, it's a really evocative description. And I think that's one thing that they are really good at doing in the show, is kind of coming up with these descriptions for things that aren't quite the thing, but when you think about it, they really are the thing. And that I feel like that wasn't a particularly eloquent way of saying it.
No, I get what you mean.
But it kind of made me think of the fat little white Nazi stormtrooper line in Clyde Bruckman's, because it's not the thing, but when you see the thing, you're like, oh yeah, that clearly is what Bruckman was talking about.
Doesn't Mulder or Scully just go at one point and go, oh yeah, it's a fat little Nazi white stormtrooper?
Exactly. And it's a completely different context, but it's that description that works really, really well. And you get that sort of payoff, like you said.
I am confident you were the first person to draw a connection between this and that line. I tell you, anywhere. That's great. That's really good. But you're right. You're totally right. They are very good at that, actually. And this is a good example. Maybe not quite as good as the Clyde Bruckman example, which obviously is very funny as well. But it's a good example. And obviously they're scraping the ice away. Mulder asks for a flashlight, which I tend to think is a very clearly a nod to the fact that they know by this point in pop culture that the X-Files is known for the flashlights, etc. Things like this. So it's a little bit, hand him his sword, hand him his Excalibur.
Yeah, it is really symbolic, isn't it? It's like, yeah, this is the point at which they are back.
Because I suppose you could look at it a bit, how Mulder spends a lot of the film, in some ways, reconstituting those parts of himself that he had when he was an FBI agent. He shaves the beard off, he goes back out into the world, he starts detecting again, he gets the flashlight. It would have worked perfectly if by the end he was in his suit.
Yes.
And his big coat. like he's put on the armour. But, alas. I suppose we do get that eventually, don't we?
Eventually, yeah.
In the revival.
But no, I like that. Sorry. No, I was going to say, I really like that reading of it, because, like, as you said, Scully has been in the world since leaving the X-Files. She's been in the hospital. She's been working. So, yeah, I really like that kind of reading of of this, the film being the process by which Mulder comes back to himself ahead of the revival seasons.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's as clean as I'm trying to make it in terms of it all fitting together perfectly well. But I think maybe had they done the third film, that might have been more of a very clear arc there. And actually it might have been that when we got to film 3, he would have slipped back into Mulder quicker, maybe, or that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's but yeah, I think can be read a little bit in that way. So obviously, the minute ends really with them looking down in horror at the ice. This was to do this. This was from the commentary. They built a block of resin and they buried it in the snow, which has obviously got the frozen head in, which we'll find out. We'll come to in a minute. So they actually built something, then put it under the snow, the fake snow in this case, in order to encase. So that's, I think, we'll talk about it in the next minute, but it's a good prop, I think, really. I wonder if they've got, you might know this, Bethan, I don't know. I wonder if they've got the block of ice with the head in it in the X-Files museum. Maybe.
I don't know. But funny enough, I was just thinking that would be an awesome prop to add to my collection if you could get hold of it.
I'll have to ask Jim and Kelly if they've got that, because that feels like one they'd have, to be fair. The ghoulish severed head of Monica Bannon in a block of ice. But there were also some deleted scenes that were cut. They're in the theatrical version, which is obviously, there were, as we've said in previous minutes, there were multiple slightly different versions of I Want to Believe with slightly different running times. But the theatrical one has deleted scenes of Dakshin, the Callum Keith Rennie villain, quote unquote character. He's watching them before we get to the bit in the next minute where he's driving up to the gate. He's watching them from a cliff edge above, and they do a composite of him watching from the cliff edge and the FBI all down looking into the ice, but they trimmed it for the no, I've got that wrong. This is on the director's cut, sorry. No, the theatrical version doesn't have this. So yeah, that's on the director's cut where you see that. It doesn't really add a lot though, to be fair.
No, I don't think we're missing anything by seeing that.
No. So, but yeah, that was part of it. But yeah, let's come back then for the final minute in our block of ice, and we'll and we'll talk a bit about the head in the ice and where it all goes. So let's do that soon, Bethan. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and please come back for the next minute. And until then, as always, trust no one.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.